Hi, I'm Justin Mirigliani, owner of Just For You Training and Consulting. In this presentation, I just want to talk to you a little bit about why Just For You is right for your company. I want to give you an agenda of what we're going to talk about in this presentation. First of all, the current state of tech. There are a lot of numbers here that are not good numbers when you look at the state of tech today in 2018. We're going to talk about that. The growing need for soft skills. The interpersonal skills of yesterday are really starting to erode. We have to stop that. We have to have more people trained in soft skills. Training's effects on productivity. There is a direct correlation between training and productivity of employees. I want to tell you who I am, why my training is different than the competition. What do you get from me? What classes I offer? What soft skills training do I offer? What tech skills do I train? And really something that is very unique with Just For You is that I offer quantitative measurements of my training results. Now, it does require work between you and I, and some companies might not have the time or feel that they need to have quantitative measurements, but if you would like to do that, I do offer it. I have not seen any other company do that yet. And then we'll summarize at the end. On this slide, I'd like to talk to you about the current state of tech, and the numbers are shocking. First of all, only 5% of the U.S. workforce can complete high-level computer-related tasks. Those would be things like pivot tables in Excel, if statements in Excel. Only a third of the population, the U.S. workforce, can complete mid-level computer tasks, things like PowerPoint presentations with animation, Excel spreadsheets with some slightly advanced formulas. Especially on the next slide, we're going to see this visually, but the levels, we're going to talk about 4 levels of technology proficiency. 43% of the workforce are at level 1 or lower. And I will tell you, level 1 and lower, they're both below average. Only 26% are level 2, which is average, and that means using simple functions. Things like sum, average, min, max, tab stops in Word. In the US, only 5% of our workforce have reached level 3 as far as computer proficiency. That means folks who could do multi-level tasks like creating nested if statements, creating pivot tables, creating access databases with queries, forms, and reports. 26% of the workforce cannot even use a computer. That's astonishing. So as I said on this slide, let's see this visually. Let's see this in a chart that I created for you. So first of all, the folks who are at below level computer proficiency, that's 14% of the workforce. That's a pretty big chunk. 29% of the workforce are at level 1. But here's the thing, level 1 and below are still below average. Average is level 2. 26% of our workforce is at level 2 when it comes to tech skills. Now this is the one that shocked me the most. Only 5% are in level 3, which would be folks who have advanced tech skills. And you'll see on the right-hand side, there's the legend that talks about that, right? Level 1 and below are below average skills. Level 2 is average. Level 3 is above average. And the site that I got this from is Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Now, this does not even count the 26% who cannot even use a computer right now. I think sometimes the word alarming is overused. People use it to try to dramatize things. But in this case, I really think that's the appropriate word. If you put together all the information that we talked about on the last slide, it comes down to this. Almost 70% of the U.S. workforce has below average to average tech skills. Only 5% is above average. We talked about that on the last slide as well. And the whopping 26% who cannot even use a computer. Now, if this were 1997 or 1999 when I started training, this would make a little bit more sense. But in 2018, this is a big problem. Here's a chart of what that looks like. So there's your 69%, almost 70% who are average to below average. The 26% who can't use a computer at all. And the very small minority of folks who are in the 5% who are expert computer users. And again, this information comes from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. I've heard people say that the folks who are experts can make up for the folks who are not experts. And I want to tell you that that is not true. It's not true. We already talked about this. 95% of the workforce cannot understand complex tech issues. But here's what makes it worse. The productivity of the 5% is all but eliminated by the lack of understanding of the 95%. And people might say, why? How does that happen? How could they eliminate it? Here's how they can eliminate it. You can't collaborate if you're not close to the same level. For instance, if someone is a very novice Excel user, and one of the folks in the 5% created an Excel spreadsheet with complex formulas, pivot tables, charts, all things that that other person can't understand, there's no way they can collaborate. It makes it impossible. Also, the 5% will have to also assist the associates who are less savvy. That takes away from their own productivity. They're spending more time assisting others and not getting their own work done at the pace that they should. And also, this comes up a lot. I see this a lot in my career. Folks who create very robust, let's say again, Excel spreadsheets with complex formulas. Sometimes somebody who's not as Excel savvy could go in and accidentally delete those formulas or change those formulas so they don't work correctly. So now the folks in the 5% have to go back and fix those mistakes. Again, that is really counterproductive in any workforce. I make my living mainly by teaching tech skills, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. But I also teach soft skills. Unfortunately, I don't get to teach them as much as I should be teaching them. They're a very overlooked aspect of employee performance. Why do I say that? Because 75% of long-term job success depends on soft skills. Communication skills, conflict management, time management, to name a few. The concentration on tech skills, while important, has also led to a deficiency in interpersonal skills. What do I mean by that? Well, nonverbal communication is 93% of your message. Here's the breakdown. 7% of your message is what you say. It's verbal. 38% is your body language, and 55% is how you come across with your tone of voice. So only 7% of your message is what you say. 93% is how you say it and how you project yourself. Now, with less physical contact, we're losing the 93%. In an email, we can't see body language. We can't hear tone of voice. So now we're relying on our message getting across in the written word or verbal. So now written communication is becoming much more crucial because we rely on things like, of course, email, text messages, and the like. Now, when I say I don't train soft skills as much as I should, the ones that I do train the most, my top 5 anyway, I train communication skills the most of the soft skills classes that I do train. Managing project teams, that's not the class where we teach Microsoft Project the application, but actually the science and the art behind managing teams. Problem-solving skills, that's very important today. We don't rely on our own brain as much as we should to solve things. We're looking for technology to take care of problems. We need those problem-solving skills to be there. leadership skills. Not everyone is a leader, but those who are in leadership roles have to have the skills to be a good leader. And effective time management. We are all stressed and we are all under the gun a lot in corporate America. And one of the reasons why there is so much stress is because we don't manage our time as effectively as we should be. And this is what I can teach to your staff. Anybody in the training industry will tell you the same thing. When the economy is doing well and companies are making money, training is plentiful. But when the economy is not doing as well and companies are not making as much money, it's the opposite. It's training that gets cut first. And I want to show you why that's counterproductive. Training provides folks with skills to make them more productive, thus your company more profitable. So first off, starting out a job, you want your new employees, people you just hired, to be successful right off the bat. You don't want them to struggle early on. If people come into a new job and they struggle, they're more likely to start looking again to try to find another job where they're potentially going to have more success. I want my employees successful right off the bat. Refreshing old skills. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a training course where people will say to me, Justin, I took this course 5 years ago, but I haven't used these skills in a long time and I really need a refresher. Or I was in college the last time I took Excel Intermediate and I don't remember everything. That was 10 years ago. So a lot of people want the refresher. They want classes from time to time, even things that they already have learned before, but just to keep it sharp. Providing new skills to employees. Any company wants their employees to be better employees. And the way to do that is to give them more skills, put more tools in their toolbox to be better employees. And that's what training provides. Again, any company would want confident employees. The more confident they are, the more productive they are. And they're less likely to leave. So turnover doesn't become an issue. If people feel happy and confident in their job, they're not going to start looking for another job. They're going to stay. And it also, training, allows employees to have performance-based goals. If you give people something to shoot for, they're going to strive for it. If they have nothing to shoot for, it's easy to get stagnant. So having training and asking those folks to quantitatively prove that they've done well because of the training, that's a way to keep them engaged and have them strive to be better. So what does training give a company? Why have training? Well, let's look at it this way. If you bought furniture, that money is spent. There's no return on investment with furniture. If you buy chairs, tables, whatever. Now, that's not the case with training. Training does have return on investment. Now, I am not suggesting that you should not spend money on furniture. You need furniture, of course, right? But you're not going to get anything back from that, where training does give back. So let's see how it gives back. One way is your employees become more productive because they're able to save time. They have more skills to get things done more quickly, thus saving you money. They're more driven. I hear it all the time. People say to me, you know, I've learned these new skills and now I look for reasons to use them. I want to put them into practice. So the more skills you give an employee, the more driven they are to actually use those skills and be successful. And in the last slide, we talked about turnover, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more here. If employees are well-trained and they are confident and happy in their job, they are less likely to leave. They want to be successful, and they want to be successful in the position they currently hold. Now, what is the potential cost of turnover? Well, let's take a look at it this way. If you have a top executive making $100,000 a year, and you have a mid-range manager making $40,000 a year, what would happen if those folks leave and you have to replace them with somebody else? Well, potentially, here's the cost of turnover. So the top executive, The new top executive now is making $213,000. So that's a dramatic increase. The mid-range manager, not as dramatic, but still an increase from $40,000 to $48,000. So if you look at that percentage-wise, that's a 20% salary increase for the new mid-range manager and an incredible 213% increase for the top executive. Now, that's potential. That doesn't mean that every situation will be this way, but that is the potential. And I want to just let you know where I got the information. Jerry Shaw, effective training on employee performance. I will tell you over and over again, as many times as you want to hear it, that training does have a huge effect on productivity. But I'm in the training business. Of course I believe that. But do the numbers bear that out? Well, I think they do. Leading edge companies, top end, Fortune 500 companies, they train 86% of their employees. While average companies, which are companies that are doing well, they're average, they train only 74%. Now, that's still a big chunk, but it's not 86%. That's a much bigger chunk. That's important. So leading edge companies see the value in training. Leading edge companies spend twice as much on training per employee. Now, somebody might say, okay, because they have the money to do it. Because they have money, they're willing to spend more on training. But that's not the case. The reason why they are leading edge companies is because they put value on training and have spent twice as much on it. So it's not that they have more money and are using it on training. It's the fact that they've used the money on training that made them leading edge companies. Companies that invest the most in workplace learning yield higher net sales per employee, higher gross profits per employee, and a higher ratio in market to book values. That's money. That's money. And that's important. That shows what kind of an effect training can have on profit. And I got this information from the National Center on the Educational Quality of the Workforce. How many times have you heard someone say, either A, we have the greatest equipment at our company, really great equipment, all the top of the line stuff, computers, whatever. Or someone else say, our company really is behind the times. We don't have the latest and greatest computers or software. Well, how much does equipment matter versus education? Which is greater? Well, it's going to show that education is greater. So a rise in productivity, let's see what happens. So if a company invests 10% on education, productivity goes up by 8.6%. You take that same 10% and you don't put it towards education, but rather you put it towards new equipment, productivity goes up 3.4%. That's over 5% less. So it's obvious that the more money you put into education, the more productive your company is going to be, as opposed to if you put the money into equipment. What good is software if folks don't know how to use the software? The equipment is only as good as the people who know how to use the equipment. That's huge. This information from the National Center on the Educational Quality of the Workforce. Training is important, but who you're getting your training from is equally as important, if not more. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a nationally televised computer training expert. I worked for 2 years on QVC demonstrating computers and computer software to up to 110 million people. My approval rating on my evaluations is at 98%, among the highest in the country. In my 19 years of training, I've trained at many different companies, including mom and pop companies to Fortune 500 companies and Ivy League schools. I've been picked to be the lead instructor on many global software rollouts for Fortune 500 companies, including proprietary software. My education consists of a BA in communications and also a master's degree in education. And I've done training for U.S. government agencies. I've done training in naval bases and at Lockheed Martin. In this slide, I just want to list for you why your company should be using Just for You for your training needs. Number one, my expertise. I have 19 years of training expertise. I've trained in large companies, small companies, mid-sized companies, all different arenas. Multi-app training. I know how important it is to be able to integrate software, and I can do that because I've trained almost all of the Microsoft applications. I know how to make them work together. Adaptiveness is key to being a good instructor. You have to be able to tailor the classes to meet the needs of each student. I can do that, and I can do that on the fly right in the middle of a class. You got to be able to go beyond the book. My approval rating right now is at almost 98%. I'm the only company that I know of to offer quantitative post-course effectiveness modeling. I want you to see how your training has led to an increase in productivity. I'm going to quantify that. I allow up to 15 students in my classes as opposed to 12 with the competition. By allowing you to have more students in each class, that helps you save money by not having to run as many classes. And I also offer my email for post-course questions and follow-up. In this section, let's talk about offerings. Let's talk about the training classes that I can provide, both in the area of tech skills and also the area of soft skills. All right, here's a list of the computer classes that I do train. For all of these classes, I train from the 2007 version up to the 2016 version. And I teach also from intro level to expert level. I teach Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Access, Microsoft Project. A little caveat with Project, it really is not intro to expert. It's more part 1 and part 2. It's a 2-day course on back-to-back days. I train Microsoft OneNote, Outlook for email, calendar. I train Visio. I also train Publisher. And if your company has a proprietary software that you would like trained to your employees, I can learn that software and train it back to your employees. Soft skills are the most overlooked aspect of the classes that I teach. 75% of long-term success is dependent on soft skills. Your company can be a company that is above the rest by giving your employees the soft skills they need to be successful. And here's a list of the classes that I teach. Effective time management, problem-solving skills, effective presentations, effective management, fundamentals of communication, practical leadership, interviewing skills for management, change management for managers, change management for employees, managing project teams, project management skills for non-project managers, and conflict management. It's a shame that these courses aren't taught as much as they should be, but your company doesn't have to fall into that trap. It's one thing to have knowledge, and it's an entirely different thing to be able to apply that knowledge. A lot of instructors have never been in the trenches. They've trained classes, they've used the curriculum, but they haven't gone beyond that. In my case, I have had a chance to go beyond that. I've worked on clinical trials and helped build them in Microsoft Project. And I helped build PowerPoint presentations to present data from those clinical trials, or Excel spreadsheets to analyze some of the data that was coming from those clinical trials. So in order to be a good instructor, I believe you have to have been in the trenches. So what I can offer you as far as consultation goes is this. I can offer you desk-side training and assistance. I've done many walk-arounds. I've been hired to walk around the floor of an office building and go into cubes and offices and train people on a one-on-one basis. Sometimes it's only a half an hour or an hour. Other times it's not for training. Maybe it's for helping them with a problem. Maybe they have a PowerPoint presentation that needs to be worked on, or an Excel file that they're having trouble with. Spreadsheet development and enhancement. I've been hired to build spreadsheets or take spreadsheets that have already been built and make them better. Maybe add some pivot tables or add some charts or do things that maybe the person who hired me doesn't have the expertise to do. Presentation development and enhancement. Again, I have been sent presentations that someone has built and they've said, Justin, can you take care of this? Can you add some animation or some transitions? Other times I've been hired to build the presentation from the bottom up. Project development, maintenance, and enhancement. This is done mainly in Microsoft Project. Not to get into too much detail, but in Microsoft Project and in project management in general, there is a 5-step process. And I am able to go through that 5-step process with you or do it for you so that I pay attention to each step, as each one is equally as important as the next. Curriculum development. I can build curriculum before a class or even do it during the class. I've had plenty of experiences where students were not getting the material from the printed material that I use, so I change it up on the fly. I can develop curriculum at any time. So if you need a specialty class, perhaps you don't want Excel intro and intermediate, maybe you want a hybrid, I can give you a hybrid class. We could do a little bit of both. Documentation development. If you need to create large Word documents, maybe you need a table of contents, maybe you need an index, a bibliography page, I can develop documentation for you. One of the many ways Just for You as a unique training company is that I can offer you a quantitative way to measure your training results. And I haven't really seen any other company put this into practice. What I'm about to show you is called the Kirkpatrick training model. And it has several levels, actually 4 levels. So let me show you those levels. The first one is reaction. Level 2 is learning. Level 3 is behavioral change. And level 4 is organizational performance. Now, in the next few slides, we're going to dive into each one of these levels of the Kirkpatrick model. These are called the 4 levels of learning evolution. I want to make sure that the training that I provide you, that we can prove that that training has made your business better. Let's take a look inside what the Kirkpatrick model is. It is collaborative. So that means for it to be successful, both you and I have to work together to get it done. The students who take the classes have to be receptive to going through the steps in the model. It definitely takes work and time. So sometimes clients will opt out. They'll say they really don't have the time to commit to the model. That's okay. If you want to do it, I'm certainly willing to do it. If that's not something you're interested in, that's okay. Now, why it might be good is it does help make future classes more effective. We learn what students need and what they might not need. Sometimes in classes, you may have 10 students and one of the chapters really only pertains to one of those 10 or 2 of those 10. We want to know that. We want to know how to make classes more germane to what these students do. And you don't want to commit paralysis by analysis. There is overkill. We want to find a quantitative measurement of what the training has done, but not to the point that it becomes overwhelming. Let's take a look inside the Kirkpatrick model at level 1, reaction. Level of enjoyment. The instructor's got to find a way to make the class exciting. There's got to be ways, and there are techniques to make the class exciting. Training doesn't have to be drudgery. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process. It can be enjoyable. Was the material useful for work? If I teach a class in Excel and I teach them if statements and pivot tables, are they going to take it back to their office and use those skills? The instructor has to make learning stress-free. If learning is stressful, then students are not going to receive the information the way they should. A good instructor will make sure everybody feels at ease. The instructor has to be easy to understand, and the instruction itself has to be easy to understand. Sometimes the examples in books can be hard. They can be topics that are very, very difficult. And the instructor has to notice that the students are not grasping it and has to find a way to explain it in a different way. Nobody learns exactly the same way as somebody else. The instructor has to find a way to make everybody understand. The evaluations at the end of the course are usually smile sheets. Smile sheets are sheets that have questions like, was the instructor a good instructor? 1 being not at all, 10 being excellent. Well, those are okay, but they really don't give you a proper measurement of the reaction. You need words. You need a paragraph maybe, or at least a couple of sentences to explain what the reaction was to the class. Let's take a look at level 2, learning. I do suggest pre- and post-class assessments to find out where the students were and where they are now. It's just like when you look at a commercial where maybe it's talking about weight loss and they have the before picture and the after picture. You want to see how things have changed. Now, how do you do that? Maybe you have short exams on whatever the topic is going to be for the class. Maybe it's by interviews. You have one-on-one interviews with students, pre or post-class or both. Those interviews can be in person or simply over Skype or maybe GoToMeeting, something like that. Now, before I get to this bullet, one more thing I want to mention on the pre- and post-class assessments. Having pre-class assessments is important because I'll tell you, I have experienced when students are in the wrong level class. For instance, sometimes a student will jump from Excel level 1 to Excel level 3, which is the advanced, and they may not be ready for that. Having a pre-class assessment will help us decide where a student should be, what level they should be taking. The problem with people taking the wrong level, there are 2 problems actually. One problem is for the student themselves, it is very difficult for them. They're not going to pick up much of anything if the whole day is a struggle because they lack the skills to actually be in that class. So it's hard on them and it's a waste of their time and your money. The other thing is if a student is continually needing my assistance to help them stay up with the class, it's taking time away from the other students in the class. And that's not a great situation either. Now, self-assessment is the next bullet here. Self-assessment of how the training has increased productivity. So the students have to tell us what the training has done to make them better at their job and more productive. That could be written in an essay or it could be an interview. And they also need to tell us not only what was learned, but maybe what they did not get. If a student goes to a class and they were expecting, let's say, pivot tables in Excel, and they did not learn pivot tables in that class, maybe that was the intermediate instead of the advanced, well, we want to know that. We want to know what they expected and what they did not get, too. Step 3 or level 3, behavioral change or transfer. Now, we've all been to self-help classes or computer classes or perhaps soft skills classes, and We had all the intentions in the world of applying what we learned, but we didn't do it. That happens. So we want to avoid that here. Now, you can't measure behavioral change right away. You need some time. And it's usually measured, as it says here, between 3 and 6 months post-training. Were the skills that were taught and knowledge gained used? Again, if we teach people if statements, or if we teach them how to create queries in Access, but they don't use it, was the training worth it? Well, no, not really if the knowledge is not being applied. Did they change their habits due to those new skills? If you're doing things the long way, and in the class you learn a shortcut, a quicker way to get it done, did you apply that? Did you change your old bad habits with the new, more productive habits? The participants have to give us a detailed assessment of the results of the training. They have to let us know how it went. And it's strictly on work results, not what it did for them at home, or not what it did for them maybe in a hobby, but the effect it had on their work. And it can't be opinion. It's got to be concrete facts. Here's level 4 of the Kirkpatrick model, organizational performance results. The primary goal. Every company has a goal in mind, and that's why they're having the training. So what is the goal? This is a list of possible goals. It's not comprehensive. There could be others. But maybe your company wants to lower spending or have a higher return on investment. Or maybe you want to improve the quality of your products. Maybe you want to have less accidents in the workplace, or more efficient production times, higher quantity of sales, whatever it may be. You have a goal in mind. That's why you're doing this training. Many companies, unfortunately, overlook this step. And that's important because this is really why you did the training in the first place. You want to make sure you're meeting your goal. The people who are involved in this are your workforce, the participants in the class. And you want them to know what's going to be measured, not only during the time that the class is, but also afterwards too, after the training is over. You may want to use a control group for this. You may have employees who are exemplary employees, and you think they would make a really good pilot group, if you will. The first people to go through this to see if the process really works. And then you want to have yearly assessments and make sure that you're hitting the targets that you need to hit to make that primary goal. That's the important thing. You want to make sure that the training really does get you to that goal. When a company spends money on advertising, they want a return on investment. They are not spending money on advertising and thinking of it as a loss. They want it to return to them more money. Well, training is the same way. So how do you assess if you are getting a return on investment? Well, there's an equation for this. The return on investment percentage is equal to the monetary benefits minus the training costs divided by the training costs times 100. So what are the training costs? You have to establish those, right? So the training costs would be the trainer. You have to pay the trainer. The materials, which would be the books. Facilities. Now, it depends. If you have your own training room, there are no charges for that. But if you don't, you might have to rent out space in a hotel. Loss of productivity. That's real. Unfortunately, when people are in a training class, obviously they're not getting their work done that day, but it might be well worth it. One day of lost productivity is nothing if you consider that they'll be more productive for the next 20 years. Assessing the results, well, that's all part of the Kirkpatrick model. Okay, let's summarize what we talked about. There is no doubt that companies are significantly more profitable when productivity rises. In order for that to happen, you have to have a well-trained workforce. There's a large disparity of ability levels, especially in tech. We talked about it. 5% of the U.S. workforce can complete very high-end computer tasks. 26% of the workforce cannot even use a computer. Well, that disparity is a major reason why there is productivity loss. Now, what I can do for you is help close that gap. Let's take the folks who are below average in computer skills and build them up. Let's take folks who are lacking in certain skills as far as soft skills go and get them on the next level. And by doing that, we make your company more productive. And not only am I going to do that with the training, I'm going to quantitatively prove it to you. I have almost 2 decades of experience with an approval rating of 98%. I'm not just a classroom teacher. I have put these skills into practice in corporate America. I know what it's like to be in the trenches. Just for You is more cost effective because I allow you to have larger class sizes. I allow up to 15 students in a class at a time. My competition only allows 12. So that means you're going to run less courses and thus save money. And I will give you post-class follow-up. I'll give you my email address. The students will have my email address. We will also, if you wish, run the Kirkpatrick model to see if the training quantifiably show that the training has been successful. I really want to thank you for taking your time to watch this video. I certainly do look forward to being a part of your organization's growth. For me, seeing a company become more profitable, more productive because of my training gives me a ton of pleasure. I hope I can do that for you. I can be reached at justforyoutc@gmail.com.